Warning: this video will contain heavy spoilers for Ace Attorney Investigations 2, as well as minor spoilers for the other Ace Attorney titles. If you haven't played the game yet and want to experience it firsthand, you may click off this video. It has been over 4 years since the release of a mainline Ace Attorney game, and an announcement for an upcoming game is nowhere to be seen. DGS 2, the latest Ace Attorney title, has been out for over 3 years, ultimately cementing progress on a potential successor title as stagnant, even non-existent. With fans of the series, including myself, growing tired of waiting, we looked around for potential clues for the upcoming 20th anniversary title and found a leak. Capcom had plans to finally localize the Gyakuten Saiban duology and release a long-awaited new game. Naturally, I was excited to hear this news, even though nothing was really confirmed at that point, so I went to see what others thought of the leak and what it could mean for the series. Now, those who clicked on this video are probably wondering, what is this awkward introduction? What does it have to do with... oh. Now, naturally, I wasn't surprised when I saw fans, including article authors, voicing their concerns for DGS being localized over an older, very egregious title, giving me vibes of, why choose these inferior titles over that one that's way better? That the friendlier way to speak the statement was to rumor that said better solo title was being localized alongside the DGS duology to deflect any potential hate towards said duology. The bottom line is, you can't really go anywhere in the Ace Attorney fandom without having someone mention this seemingly obscure game, and it sure bothered me a great deal, which motivated me to make a video about said game. A different kind of review, if you will. I tried to make the video as fun as I could, but feel free to take this review with the entire planet's worth of salt. Yes, I'm expecting a lot of people to immediately click the dislike button and trash talk in the comment section solely for this video's title alone. Therefore, I implore you to watch this video and subsequent future releases all the way to the end. With that said, let's begin. Ace Attorney Investigations 2 is officially the most beloved title in the Ace Attorney series, often considered to be the one title to somehow surpass Trials and Tribulations as the best Ace Attorney game of all time. It has been praised by fans and critics for its appealing and fun gameplay, as well as an incredibly deep overarching narrative that again puts Trials and Tribulations to shame. As you can tell from the title of this video, I'm strongly opposed to these notions, which makes me a rare adherent to a very unpopular opinion. Because, when was the last time you've seen anyone, criticize Investigations 2? Almost no one. In all my years as an Ace Attorney fan, these were the only people I've seen who expressed negative sentiments towards this oddball. Now, you might be confused over how these people, including myself, can, at all, see problems with an otherwise perfect game, so I'll give you a little background. I started playing Ace Attorney with my brother and sister in 2018, falling in love with the first game upon just the first few minutes of gameplay. We played the trilogy throughout 2018, finished Trials and Tribulations in 2019, as well as First Investigations. We played Apollo Justice and Dual Destinies in 2019, and as you can tell, we got so hooked that we became active in the Ace Attorney fandom, where we stumbled upon comment after thread, praising a sequel to the First Investigations spin-off we played throughout late 2018 to early 2019, not knowing what to expect. We then played Investigations 2 from 2019 to early 2020 with very high expectations, only for us to complete it dismayed and aggravated. All that praise, and yet Investigations 2 couldn't live up to it. My brother, sister, and I were so puzzled over how could this excessively boring, plot-contrived, idiotic game with so many problems receive this much blind worship by most Ace Attorney fans that we decided to look for clues behind why everyone loved it where we didn't. One theory came to mind. Investigations 2 was probably designed to be more enjoyable for single player, but that isn't even true. Normally we always played Ace Attorney together, but even having us play it alone didn't change our opinions, let alone for the other games. So we ultimately had the epiphany that Ace Attorney Investigations 2 was just a really bad game. Now, I know you must be thinking, Joy, you and your siblings are total idiots, disliked. Now don't be hasty. I'll do my best to help you at least see where we're coming from. You see, there are many things hurting Investigations 2 that only few players notice, and we're going to dive into them over the course of the review. It's explaining how the most beloved title in the series is really the worst Ace Attorney game of all time. If it's not that, then at least it's the worst Ace Attorney game I've ever played. That much is true. Let's start short and sweet with the game's history. As the last of 6 games released on the DS, Ace Attorney Investigations 2, or as known by its Japanese name Gyakuten Kenji 2, was released in February 3, 2011. Quite an odd release date for a game so adored, of which some came purely from the fact that this game was never released outside Japan. To say that Investigations 2 is a perfect game purely because it's a Japan-only title is ridiculous, given how much hate Fire Emblem 12 receives, despite having a very similar history, which we'll briefly talk about here. In the late 2000s, narrative-based games such as Fire Emblem and Ace Attorney were proving to be unpopular as they were overtaken by genres that were far more meta, if you will. 2D and 3D platformers, and especially first-person shooters, were taking over the market, pushing RPGs and visual novels behind, making them fall short in sales, especially outside of Japan. Both Investigations 2009 and Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon had very disappointing sales, resulting in both of their developers having to release their respective sequels only in Japan. Although I think Investigations 2 sold okay in Japan, New Mystery of the Emblem flopped, which is ironic because the latter was an actually amazing game, my personal favorite Fire Emblem to be exact. Fire Emblem fans watching would most likely flame me for making that statement, which is adding fuel to the fire, because AAI 2 is a game that I find very overrated, yet another bold claim, the latter of which is the subject of this series of videos. Hey now, what will you call this game over the course of said videos? Well, I decided to refer to this game as GK2, the acronym of the Japanese name, mostly because it would take too much time to pronounce AAI 2, or any other variation for that matter, even though I will be using said variations less frequently. Generally though, my main reason to call this game GK2 is simply because it sounds cool. With that out of the way, let's actually start talking about the game. As an Ace Attorney game, there's not much to say about the menu. No sound room, no gallery, no options, no nothing. So our only option is to jump into the jutting jacuzzi of joy of a first case that is Turnabout Target. Why this sudden shift in tone? We'll get back to that, I promise. The president of Zengfa arrives with his plane to an unnamed city in Japan/the United States depending on what patch of the game you're playing, and as a sweet callback to his predecessor, the president thanks the country for solving the case surrounding the Geregarasu, calling to the hammer of justice in an epic, memorable shot. But because this is Ace Attorney we're talking about, we can't go anywhere without the murder happening. So guess who the target is? The president himself, putting the entire crowd on edge, as Edgeworth is heroically called to the scene, with the greatest opening introduction theme of any video game playing in the background. Walking into the crowd, Edgeworth finds Detective Gumshoe, where they start solving the mystery as to who the president's shooter could have been. They bump into Nicole Swift, a dubious, light-hearted reporter, who we battle with the brand new Logic Chess, a mechanic that I'll go in depth with much later over the course of this review. The first Logic Chess, however, was invigorating, carefully approached, and well-paced and explained. After interrogating Swift, we come to a shocking revelation. Shelly the Killer has returned with his favorite alias, and he instantly becomes a suspect. So of course we interrogate him, only to find that there were two Red Hoods. Nicole Swift was involved in the assassination wearing said second hood, which was really her prized parka? These revelations work just as well as they are shocking. How they're actually explained thoroughly to destroy any possible contrivances. So what's the next course of action? Battle with Nicole Swift, of course. After formerly being a somewhat helpful witness, she becomes another suspect. And as if this case wasn't awesome enough, the god of awesomeness himself intervenes as this incredibly intimidating looking man shows up to make a really interesting first impression before telling us two very important things. Good news. The president wasn't killed, instead we got a different victim. Bad news. We are no longer allowed to investigate, and Nicole Swift is officially being turned in for killing the real victim? This is getting bad for our heroes. Swift is desperately pleading not guilty, and we see her rightfully succumb to fear, before realizing that there's no way she could have killed bodyguard Ethan Rook, the actual victim of the case. He's also the one who injured Shelly's left arm. Suddenly, Shelly the Killer seizes and threatens to murder Horace Knightley, the man who put us on edge earlier, who also deftly reveals Doe's true identity in the process. The killer reopens the investigation for Edgeworth, where we are then told to investigate the president's plane. Before heading off, in a rather defiant act, Edgeworth orders a now more capable Gumshoe, we'll get back to that later, to gather his men to surround the plane to prevent it from flying off. It's a suspenseful and lovely transition to the next act that most certainly results in negative consequences to Edgeworth in later cases. So inside the plane, Rook's body dominates the scene, as expected. With Knightley still in life's reach, the killer orders us to investigate the corpse and scene, before taking his leave with a mysterious outlook, saying he's already seen the truth. This moment intrigued me for the coming cases, as the questions it brings up demand quite the answers. Once the killer leaves, the president intervenes, and he immediately strips us of our investigative rights. All of our evidence is literally taken away from us by Knightley on the president's behalf, leaving us with only one option. We do battle with the president, first with yet another well-timed Logic Chess, and then with a rebuttal with such fitting music. The president comes across as imposing, which really made me feel as if I'm doing battle with a foreign president. But like most politicians, the supposedly fearless, muscular, lion-like president is an ashamed, easily frightened, saddened old bear. I don't really know why I said this, other than I really love Dijun Huang in every scene he's in, including in the prologue. His twist was the revelation of his false persona, which gets used for something dumber in a later case, but that's for well later. One other thing I really love about Huang in this case is how he's actually shocked and saddened over Rook's death, increasingly doubting his subordinate, that being Knightley, as Edgeworth gets closer to the truth, as well as Huang himself also wanting to know said truth. It's at this point that yet another revelation is revealed, that Horace Knightley was the killer all along, framing Nicole Swift while also getting her to help him with his plan to kill Ethan Rook and take his place. As for Knightley himself, he happens to be the coolest first boss in the entire series with an interesting motive for murder, that being, he's jealous of Ethan Rook and he wants to take his place so he can be on top. That gun twirling, oh wow, that gun twirling, it makes him as fearsome as it makes them awesome. Also, remember when our evidence was taken away before we got back? In a beautiful scene, it is shown that Knightley manipulated the evidence by switching weapons. No other first case ever does something remotely close to this, and it's truly admirable. So as the evidence ruined, the battle against Knightley becomes even more suspenseful and climactic, as we literally crush him with his own fingerprints on the same evidence he manipulated and a crushed bullet. The creativity is off the charts, and like the case itself, is brimming with ambition. Knightley's breakdown is the coolest looking 2D one yet. Just watch. And with Knightley subdued, Nicole Swift and the President thank us for solving the mystery while also acknowledging their misdeeds. The case pulls no punches and closes off right here, suggesting that the game has only just begun. Oh wow, what a fantastic start to an Ace Attorney game. No other first case could ever live up to the legacy of Turnabout Target, including GK2's successors. Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice both have a generic 2001 style case progression. Even the DGS duology, which do have the best first cases in the 3DS era, only gets close to the quality of Turnabout Target without actually surpassing it. This means we will have to talk about first cases in general before I offer my closing thoughts on Turnabout Target itself. First cases in Ace Attorney. They're generally underwhelming due to their short length and being restricted to the courtroom most of the time. The first two Ace Attorney games have first cases with extremely simple case logic and one-note, very predictable boss characters. Turnabout Memories tries to shake the mold by having this boss not be shown from the start of the case, but is still just as obvious as before, and yet is hailed as the greatest first case of all time? How is Turnabout Memories even memorable? Then we have Turnabout Trump from Apollo Justice, which has the opposite problem. It literally presents us with the twistiest twist in the history of Ace Attorney, made solely for the shock value. I'm not saying Turnabout Trump is bad, no, far from it, it's great. It's just that the rest of the game feels inferior to it, hence why everyone says AJ sucks because the first case is the best one. Investigations 1 shows us the boss, but isn't restricted to the courtroom, and I already mentioned the 3DS titles, so I brought up an infographic for easy visual comparison. When comparing GK2 to every game in the series, including the 3DS titles, we can see that Turnabout Target strikes a perfect balance. Its boss character is unpredictable and well hidden, but not so much a gigantic spoiler like in Apollo Justice. There's also the feeling of freedom because you get to see much more happen in the same amount of time by not being restricted to a courtroom. Even cross-examining your foes in the process, it's just genius. I really love investigations, and that's just not something in the script. I don't understand how people still consider Turnabout Target inferior to Turnabout Memories or Turnabout Trump, but to me it really is the best first case in the series, even if it has flaws of its own that we'll get into right now. Enter my closing thoughts. I've made it clear now that Turnabout Target is the best, not favorite, but best first case in the series. I've said that a billion times already. Now a lot of you will wonder why I'm even saying GK2 is so bad in the first place, since the first case is such an amazing first impression. This whole time I've been doing nothing but praising the game, despite saying a lot of bad things about it earlier. Well, here's my answer. To me, Turnabout Target to GK2 is what Turnabout Trump was for Apollo Justice in 2007. Most people consider Turnabout Trump the best case in 2007's entry, and as a callback to Jack's Melancholy Palace's video on said entry, I'll relate his video to mine with a referential statement. This is the best case in the game. It has the best introduction of any first case, doubling as the best intro in the game.
It has the most fun gameplay in the series to date, and case logic that is more challenging but also more fun than what any other first case had to offer. It even has more characters and they're all great for the most part. There's no filler in this case, unlike the rest of the cases in this game, and I like the subtle references to other parts of Ace Attorney and even old Fire Emblem. The pacing is great, and the set pieces and battles are fantastic. However, I can't look past this case's many flaws. Yes, you heard me right. This case isn't perfect, and neither is GK2 itself. Turnabout Target had problems I noticed from the very beginning. The game just started and things were already looking quite off. Kay and Gumshoe had rather inconsistent characterization, especially the latter, though that's a subject for later in this review. Any attempt at humor felt weak and poorly thought out. There's no incentive for losing, etc., etc. However, it turns out these are all problems with GK2 that later cases only make worse by stacking up more problems on top of those already existing ones that persist throughout the entire game. But Turnabout Target's biggest problem, especially with how good it is relative to the rest of the game, was setting up extremely high expectations, seeing how ambitious the story was. I was very excited to see where they could go with it, but alas, it's all downhill from here.